All right, good morning. We are convening this agenda briefing for council. My name is Esther Mannheimer. I'm mayor of the city of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the November 7th, 2024 agenda briefing work session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on our city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum channel 193, assuming your Charter Spectrum is restored. You may listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801 with meeting code 3198. As with all agenda briefings, we do not take public comment during this meeting. Council and staff, please unmute yourselves and say a quick hello when I call your name, and I'll start with our Vice Mayor, Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
And Councilwoman Shanika Smith will be joining us shortly, so I'm going to go to Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hey, everybody.
City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good morning.
And City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
Thank you. And before I turn it over to our City Manager Deborah Campbell, let me just say congratulations to Sage and Kim and your re-election. And Bo Hess, if you're out there watching us, welcome to you. We'll be swearing in our new council member at our first meeting in December, which Maggie will remind us of that later on, probably in this meeting. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah Campbell.
All righty. Thank you, Mayor, and good morning again. The last time, believe it or not, that we had an agenda briefing meeting was on September the 19th. Obviously, a lot has changed in our community since September 19th, and this agenda will reflect those efforts to respond to the devastating storm that severely impacted our community in late September. So welcome back, everybody. As you know, these meetings are designed to provide an overview of items that are scheduled for your regularly scheduled business meeting, and that upcoming meeting is scheduled for November the 12th. It will be in person at City Hall. Assistant City Manager Ben Woody is going to review the work session agenda, and normally we would also review council committee agendas, but those meetings have been canceled until January 2025. We'll also review some of the items that will be coming up on your agenda as a part of your 8-week review of agenda items. And last, and probably where we'll spend the majority of our time, is under the other issues and updates section, where staff and our partners, we see a lot of possibly unfamiliar names on the screen. We'll review current efforts and a proposed structure of how we're organizing to help the community recover from this devastating storm. So I'll now turn it over to Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell, Mayor, members of council. Good morning, Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager. We have a very long consent agenda for this meeting, and much of that, as a matter of fact, the items on the consent all the way up to item Q are recovery related. So I'm going to cover those in a little more detail. And then after item Q, the remaining consent items are more of our normal business, and I'll selectively cover some of those. As usual, at any point, if you have a question, just raise your hand, or if there's an item I don't cover you want to discuss, please let me know. So I'm going to jump right into this. No proclamations at our meeting next week. Again, items B through Q are recovery related, and I just want to make a general statement that applies to all these, so I won't have to say it each time individually, but the city's intention with these recovery related expenses is that, or our intention and expectation is that these contract expenses will be reimbursed by FEMA. So again, we are positioning ourselves as we undertake these recovery efforts to make sure we're doing so in a manner that we can be reimbursed for those down the road, so to speak. And of course, Haggerty's on our call today, and we'll talk more about some of this later in the meeting. So I'm going to start with items B, C, and D. I'm going to do those together. These three items ratify contracts with our three local construction firms that made repairs to the water distribution system and access roads in the aftermath of the storm. These three contract ratifications total up to $14 million. So that's a reflection of the cost and the extent to which the damage was that had to be repaired to our water system. Item E is a contract ratification that provides additional staffing support for the maintenance and repairs of essential frontline emergency response vehicles. So that increased our ability to repair or make sure our vehicles have stayed online and on the roads during this response effort. Excuse me. Items F and G are not to exceed contracts totaling $450,000. These supported the collection and disposal of household waste following Hurricane Helene. The amount of waste that we had to collect after that first week of the storm was more than usual due to large amounts of spoiled food that came out of residential homes. So we needed help with that. Also, due to flooding damage at the Buncombe County Transfer Station, we had to divert those initial waste collection trucks to either the Buncombe County landfill or the waste management transfer station. So again, we needed help with that in those initial waste collection days. Moving on, items H and I are the initial debris removal contracts that were entered into with Debris Tech and Southern Disaster Recovery, also known as SDR. I'll note these contracts were terminated on October 29th in order for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to provide debris management services moving forward. The contracts were structured as not to exceed contracts. However, the city has not yet received invoices for services rendered through October 29th. And our initial expectation is that the total cost of these two contracts will not exceed $1.25 million. And again, their structure is not to exceed, but of course we'll only pay for the actual cost incurred during that time period. Moving on, item J is another storm-related contract ratification. This was for catering services that provided 3 hot meals per day to our first responders and partner agencies. That began on September 26th. It is scheduled to run through November 10th. That current contract is valued at about $550,000. And again, that was really what we use to feed the critical staff that were out doing the work for the community. And I'll just say that's been a big hit with the first responders and our partner agencies to have that available. Item K is another item related to our first responders and partners. That is an amount up to $300,000 that provides 3,000 single night lodging stays for those essential employees. So that covered a lot of the lodging associated with the response. Item L is a not to exceed contract with Haggerty. This initial contract's in the amount of not to exceed $1 million. And what Haggerty is doing is providing recovery management services to help guide our response to Hurricane Helene. We'll talk a little more about that later in the meeting. Items M and N are both related to the city's housing trust fund and indirectly support housing impacts from Hurricane Helene. Item M is correcting loan terms for the Housing Trust Fund loan to Habitat for Humanity to support down payment assistance. And item N temporarily suspends Housing Trust Fund loan payments on a case-by-case basis. Item O ratifies a contract with the city's transit service provider to provide, and they did this, provide supplemental transit operations in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Helene. A total amount is not known at this time yet, but it's anticipated that these services were approximately $217,000 per week. Item P is your second budget amendment you'll hopefully adopt. These budget amendments support Helene disaster recovery and response expenses. And so this is money, this particular item is $4.2 million that is funded to the city by FEMA. And again, this supports our ongoing recovery efforts. Item Q is our final storm-related consent item, and this is a contract to move forward with replacement of the Muni building roof or municipal building. This is something we knew we needed to do, but after the storm, significant damage was incurred as a result of that storm. So we're having to go ahead and move forward with this contract due to the damage to that roof. So I'm gonna pause there. I covered every storm-related consent item and just want to see if there's any questions on any of those. Councilwoman Roney, then Councilwoman Turner.
Yeah, hopefully this will be just more of a process question. I'm already getting questions about, the nitty-gritty one at a time in it. And I have wondered, before things get really deep in the weeds, have we considered having one place, whether it's a dashboard or a document where all of these contracts live, so that folks can access them easily and quickly instead of having to rely on open records requests?
I'll take a first shot at that, but I'll also take help from anybody else on the call. But of course, all this information is published as part of our council agendas and available in that manner. I'm not aware of a discussion about centralizing some of this documentation on the webpage, but I would think that's something we can consider. And I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
I can just briefly add that part of what we're going to talk about under other issues is our recovery strategy. And a major component of that is developing a better hub of information and better data visualization. So that's something that we can certainly consider as we develop those enhanced communication tools.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll actually layer in. I also requested that even just for councilwomen to have like a folder we could see stuff at. So I would appreciate that as well. My question is just kind of in theory, can someone explain to me how the money's moving? If we're expecting reimbursement, are we using general fund balance, enterprise fund balances? How is money moving while it awaits repayment?
And you're going to hear some of this from the Haggerty team under other issues, but what we can share with you is it's dependent on the funding source. So typical general fund expenditures that we're expecting reimbursement from will be coming out of the general fund. Similarly, expenses coming out of water that are reimbursable would be fronted by the water fund and then reimbursed to that fund.
Okay, just want to make sure I was thinking the right track. Thank you.
And as we, have a process like this where we keep doing this more and more, are all of these reimbursable? Do you know where the money is coming from? Like, I know that there's just like a complex web and that we've been told like everything is reimbursable, but like my sense is there's a lot more nuance and that Haggerty is helping us kind of chart through that. And so understanding, I don't know if it's through the consent agenda, but like, are all of these helping us understand which of these expenses as we get from, we had to set contracts to feed people at the Civic Center to like the next steps through the next, the 100-day mark, which is reimbursable, where that money is coming from. So I don't know if that's in the consent process, but really making sure that we can have a line of sight into like what the expenses are and how they're tracked to reimbursement. And if they are, would be nice. And I don't know how to do that, but happy to discuss more, but that's something I'd love to see us evolve through.
And if I could, Rachel, that is the value of having these types of consultants that are helping us review and account for every dime that we are spending related to the storm event. Whenever there's an indication on an agenda item that this is likely reimbursable, then we have vetted that fairly thoroughly with the consultants and with FEMA and with the state to determine if those are actually reimbursable expenses. And let me assure you that we are being extremely careful with how we spend scarce resources and trying to ensure that, again, things that are related to the storm recovery, that they are reimbursable from some source, whether it be federal, state, or foundation or wherever to replenish.
And so all of the things that we're looking at on this consent agenda that are storm related, we expect to be reimbursable. Cool.
That is correct.
And if we get into a point like going forward where that starts to shift or split out, where things start changing, just helping, like there's just a lot for us to learn about this dynamic. So whatever that method is, but thanks, I appreciate that.
And it was for us as well. And fortunately, we had expertise on our own staff with Jeremy Knighton and Chief Case, who have had these types of experiences. And then again, retaining Haggerty to help monitor and ensure that our processes and all of the documentation, because for most of us, this is new for us as well. And so we're definitely being very conscientious and cognizant of monies that are spent, particularly during this period where we're learning. We're all learning, but we will try to provide you all with as much detailed information as possible about those expenditures.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'm going to finish up the consent agenda. I'm just going to highlight a couple of items. These are more of our normal kind of operational business outside of the storm. I do just want to flag item S. I'm not going to cover it in detail, but I just want to note that shows you we do this often for special events in downtown and around the city. But I think that just shows you that we are having really our return of holiday related special events. So I just only flagged that to see that we've got some of those things that make Asheville unique and special, beginning to happen again, and we'll be able to be downtown as a community and participate in some of these holiday related events. Moving down through the agenda, items U and V, I just want to flag those. Item U is a resolution that dissolves the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, also known as HIAC. But item V authorizes our city manager to apply for grant funding to continue supporting our COC, or continuum of care. So this is just two items that aren't necessarily related, but I think just indicate where we're moving with our homeless initiatives. And finally, for me on the consent, unless there's other questions, item Y provides for the purchase of 4 transit buses and also to equip those 4 buses with standardized transit technology platforms. So I thought that was important to share as well. And I will stop there, and Councilwoman Roney, turn it over to you.
It should be no surprise that I'm getting requests about why these would be diesel buses and not hybrid, especially because of our goals for carbon reduction. Do we have an answer for the public for that?
The quick answer for that is right now we still are limited in needing 30-foot buses, and there is not a 30-foot hybrid option currently available.
Thank you, Rachel.
You're muted, Maggie.
Sorry. Can I also point out that City Council's organizational meeting will be on the first Tuesday of the month, December 3 at 4 o'clock in the council chamber. We will follow that up with the normal meeting on Tuesday, December 10. Thank you.
Any other questions on the consent? It is a lengthy consent agenda for this meeting. Seeing none, the last item on your regular business meeting is we will have a manager's update, during which a recovery update will be provided. We'll have staff there as well as Haggerty. We're going to talk a little more about that later in the meeting, so you'll get to see kind of what that process is going to look like. As Ms. Campbell said earlier, there are no council committees to cover as part of this. On our 8-week agenda, I think what you'll continue to see is recovery related contract and expenditures. So the part we went through today will probably be a regular occurrence on most of your agendas, at least for the foreseeable future. I do want to flag 2 items on your 8-week agenda, and they're both on December 10th. On December 10th, you're going to receive your FY24 audit presentation. So I know that's something we all look forward to annually. But also I want to forward that we still intend to bring forward a contract for the city's recommended downtown bid operator. So we would like to continue moving the bid process forward and hope to have that contract to council for your consideration at your December 10th meeting, which will allow the city and the contractor to begin standing up those bid services in early 2025. Any questions on the 8-week agenda?
What you just mentioned about the bid, did anything change with it? I mean, are we still looking at, like an ambassador program? Is all that still baked in? Has anything shifted in response to this disaster?
It's all baked in because all those elements that the community discussed and council really kind of directed us to consider, I think they all remain important parts of a bid, but I think it's important to say also I think there's enough flexibility in the scope that we will be able to prioritize bid services in a way that works for where the community is at right now. And I think that's part of what's so great about a bid contractor is they're going to be able to be nimble and kind of meet whatever the need is.
So this contract will be specific to those actions that they'll be taking, and there will be room for us to discuss and encourage other activities, or it's just going to come to us as is and get a yay or nay?
It'll come to you kind of as is the contract, but I think within the contract, there's some flexibility for the city and the contractor to kind of sequence and prioritize what the bid works on, especially because we're just standing this program up. So again, for those first 6 months of 2025, I think there's some ability to make sure the bid is going to meet the needs, whatever those may be in our current environment.
Will the contractor be there to discuss?
I would assume the contractor would be at the meeting, yes.
If we can, let's make an official request for have them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on those items? If not, I'm going to turn it back over to Ms. Campbell for other issues and updates.
Thank you, Ben. As I noted earlier, the majority of this meeting would likely be spent on us discussing about an organizational structure, a framework, working with our partners. How are we internally, from a staffing perspective, supporting the recovery efforts related to the storm? But as you well know, we also have a city to run. And so we are trying to almost divide and conquer in terms of staff resources to provide our ongoing services and the things that are needed for us to, I guess, maintain some type of normal cadence or new normal cadence as it relates to, again, normal service delivery. But also, we cannot understate the amount of effort and resources that it is going to take for us to recover and support the community at this time. And so obviously recovery efforts is a priority for our organization, but it isn't the only one. There are many, many other things we need to attend to, as I said, just normal service delivery. So we've invited our partners to help explain their roles, and we will, following that, Rachel will provide a detailed presentation on how staff is organizing ourselves to respond. So at this time, Rachel, I will turn it over to you to introduce our partners.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning again, Mayor and City Council. Not on the agenda, but we do have some late breaking news that we want to share with you. We've got Emily Ball here to share some exciting news about shelter updates. And from there, we'll then transition into our recovery framework presentation.
Good morning. We do have exciting news. I'm so glad to be here to be able to share this with you. As I'm sure you're aware, The Red Cross has been supporting folks in shelter who were disaster impacted, don't have any other options. Those people are at the WNC Ag Center and Gold's Gym. The Ag Center is set to close this Sunday, November 10th, and Gold's Gym was set to close close behind that. Red Cross is very committed to taking care of people. They have been a really incredible partner in this sheltering initiative, and so have worked really collaboratively with us to transition operations. And we now have a solidified plan around that we're glad to share. Starting on Sunday, those operations will transition to the rescue mission. Western Carolina Rescue Ministries will become the operator of that shelter. The Ag Center will still close, but anyone at the Ag Center who continues to need shelter will be able to transition to Gold's Gym for continuity of care now provided by the rescue mission with support from Sunrise Community for Recovery and Wellness. The Red Cross has a lease on that property through the end of the calendar year, so through December 31st. And the rescue mission, with support from Sunrise, will be providing shelter at that location for that time. As of this morning, there were 164 people in shelter between those two locations. So this is a really critical community collaborative initiative that's come together to ensure that those folks continue to have shelter availability. In the meantime, people are working hard to work with residents in both shelters on next steps for them. So identifying other locations, connecting them with other resources. There are teams of service providers in both shelters actively engaging with people about what their options might be, enrolling them in anything that they're eligible for. But again, I'm so glad to be able to share that we will continue to have shelter available past Sunday and through the end of the year as provided by the rescue mission. I want to really highlight the collaborative partnership in this. The Red Cross is fully funding that initiative with the rescue mission through the end of the year. That's tremendous support from them, tremendous scale up from the rescue mission to be able to operate that, and excellent collaboration between the rescue mission and Sunrise. Novant Health has been a really good partner in ensuring that that space can continue to be available for this purpose. And then county staff and I have been supporting the coordination around this to make sure that we have a good plan for people. Does mean we do anticipate that by the end of the year, we will still have people in those shelters who continue to need shelter. And I know that we will have new people who need shelter. People are continuing to feel the effects of the disaster. So we anticipate the need for shelter past December 31st. Means we need to identify a location, we'll need to identify continued resources, but we do now have a good window of time to be able to do that work and to ensure that continuity of care. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that, and then I'd love to also share a Code Purple update with you.
Emily, thanks for being here and sharing exciting news. That's amazing from Red Cross. I'm getting questions a lot from individuals that say, I have this resource I'd like to rent to someone that has lost their house. And I've been sending them to the FEMA sign up program, but is there something we can do to coordinate folks that are like these 164 people directly? Is there a process where I can get these people that are contacting me in touch with those people specifically?
I'd say yes. And I would also say that probably ties into some of the updates you're going to hear later in the meeting about overall recovery work and the framework around that. But yes, how wonderful to have people who want to contribute, and we certainly want to be able to plug those folks in. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just trying to not take up too much space on that at the same time. The questions I'm getting are, how is the COC operating, and how is the larger membership being engaged so that we can truly have all hands on deck?
Great question. So first of all, this shelter initiative that I just described came through the COC shelter planning work group. That was the origin, brought all of those folks to the table to develop that partnership. The COC board will meet on this coming Tuesday morning in person at the Harris Cherokee Center for a business meeting as well as a disaster recovery planning session. We've had great technical assistance from HUD and from the state for the continuum of care about disaster response And so we'll be starting to work towards a disaster recovery plan through the COC. As always, those meetings are open to the membership and the public. Those materials went out on Tuesday, and again, meeting is this coming Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We did in October, we paused most committee and work group meetings just as people were, as we all were, doing our best to meet basic needs. And our focus as staff was really in working closely with service providers to ensure that their operations were stable to be able to take care of the folks that they're working with. So as we are sort of transitioning from immediate crisis response into recovery, I think that really is the lane for the COC. Short term, our approach has been using the COC as a key communication channel to be sure people are informed about what's happening. I'll share this shelter update with the COC via email, for example. But as we shift into recovery, COC is a planning body, and so that will really be the right lane for the COC to work on disaster recovery planning related to folks experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Emily.
All right, lastly, quick Code Purple update is that, as you may know, ABCCM was slated to host Code Purple at the Veterans Restoration Quarters and at Transformation Village. And they are still on track to provide Code Purple for women and women with children at Transformation Village, effective immediately, ready to go tonight if Code Purple were called tonight. Veterans Restoration Quarters, of course, was flooded, and that facility is not available this winter. But ABCCM has secured another location to provide Code Purple for men. That will be at their former admin building at 2020th Street. That's just off of Patton Avenue near Goodwill and the DMV. At the moment, they think they had previously sold that property, so have worked with the new owner on being able to use that space for that purpose this winter. The moment they anticipate about 50 beds there, but they need to do some further analysis to really get clear on that capacity. Red Cross is providing them with cots for that location. So again, a lot of collaboration, a lot of folks working hard to be sure that people have shelter options available.
Thank you, Emily, and great work. Emily's examples just kind of provide you all with a snapshot into the amount of interagency coordination that's been happening as part of our recovery efforts, and then more broadly as the continuum of care continues to get established. So Emily, thank you for your leadership, and to the partners that have been involved, really appreciate them stepping up in this moment of extreme need in our community. So we'll now transition into an overview of our recovery framework as an organization, and then more details specifically on our partnership with Hagerty. Before I go into my slides, I want to first introduce Bridget Herring, who you all know as our sustainability director, but for the purposes of recovery, Bridget is serving as the deputy recovery coordinator. So I'll be serving as the primary recovery coordinator. Bridget is going to be my right hand in all things recovery related. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bridget.
Good morning, Mayor and members of Council. Thanks for having me. As Rachel mentioned, we're going to hear from a number of our partners during this presentation, as well as Rachel and I are going to tag team some of these slides. So wanted to let you know that we do have question breaks built in. So the suggestion would be to get through those points to ask questions, but want to make sure that you know that those are coming. And our first one is coming after our partners with Hagerty Consulting wrap up their brief presentation. So if we move on to the next slide, the key takeaways that we want to leave you with today is recognizing that the recovery from Tropical Storm Helene is going to be a cyclical process that's going to evolve over time and iterate as more information comes to light, as our needs of our community change and the resources that we have available to meet those needs, so will our recovery process evolve. But the framework that we're utilizing is one that's developed in guidance with FEMA, and it's there to help foster collaboration, streamline decision-making, and establish reporting and a cadence as we work through this long-term recovery process and build this up. So to do that, we're creating priority-specific recovery support groups that, in the world of new acronyms, that one is RSG, that you might hear going forward. And these are established to help foster that collaboration and move us forward. And so these will work both with subject matter experts from contracted services such as Haggerty Consulting, as well as FEMA and others, to make us successful as we move through this process. And as this process is being developed and iterates and evolves, the staff is committed to keeping you all updated as that progress is being made. And then once we establish this recovery framework, it will include a structured plan for more long-term recovery, knowing that this process is going to take quite some time to get us back to our new normal. So moving on to our next slide, another peek at what we're going to discuss as we move through here is we're going to go through how Haggerty came to be, and you'll get to meet them and learn more about the services that they're providing. Learning more about our disaster recovery framework, what those roles of responsibilities are, who is taking on new roles in the organization and how we're structuring that, what our immediate next steps are and what that action plan is moving forward. And then I believe we'll close with Hannah Vick from FEMA to give you a snapshot of how we've been working together and how they've seen other communities working together in this space. So we put out a request for proposals for these services to help the city with long-term recovery. And the scope of work included disaster recovery, financial and grant management technical assistance, community planning, and long-term recovery support. So as you can see here, we received 16 proposals, and Haggerty was selected as the most qualified firm. We looked at both qualifications of Haggerty as a whole, the personnel that are going to be on the team that's serving Asheville, as well as references from their past projects and performance, their technical approach, and cost. So now I'm going to turn it over to Ari Ranoni with Haggerty Consulting to give you a little bit more information on the work that they do and how they're supporting the city.
Good morning. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Mayor and members of council for having us today. We're really honored to be here to help the city recover after experiencing such a devastating event that affected so many lives. My name is Ari Ranoni. I'm a Deputy Director of Recovery at Haggerty Consulting, leadership on this engagement with the city, and I'm joined by my two colleagues, Tracy Phillips, also Deputy Director of Disaster Recovery at Haggerty, and Sherry Blanton, who will be Project Manager embedded here in the city with your staff throughout the engagement. So this slide sort of summarizes a bit of Haggerty's background and experience. We have over 20 years of experience working with clients at the local government, state government, and federal levels with managing disaster recovery funds. Our work is organized around 4 areas: disaster preparedness, response, recovery, and hazard mitigation. The unique thing about our firm that we like to discuss is that our entire business is focused on disaster recovery and emergency management. We are not an accounting firm. We are not an engineering firm that does that on the side. This is our core business and our core mission. It's our passion. We've been involved with every major catastrophic disaster since 9/11. That includes, but is not limited to, Hurricanes Katrina, Sandy, Maria, Florence, Ian, wildfires in California, and of course, COVID-19. We've had clients across 27 states, but really our hallmark focus is with helping local government recoveries. One example of that is helping New York City recover after Hurricane Sandy. And after subsequent events, we helped them secure $18 billion of FEMA funding for their recovery and infrastructure recovery. Overall, we've helped our public sector clients, including local governments, manage over $95 billion of federal funding for disaster work. That includes $70 billion of FEMA public assistance funding, which is a funding stream you'll hear quite a lot about, both from us and from city management and FEMA likely later this presentation. It is the first and largest source of funding for the city's recovery, and it's something that we'll talk about a bit later. Our strength really stems not only from this experience, but it's driven from the caliber of our professionals. We bring subject matter experts, as Bridget mentioned, in disaster recovery and resilience programs and the nuances that underpin them. I think folks have been discussing those nuances a bit already at this meeting. Some of those folks that we bring to bear includes a former FEMA administrator, a former senior leadership at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and also the former director of the North Carolina Division of Emergency Management. We've done quite a bit of work in the state and are currently supporting a few clients for Hurricane Helene. It's our honor to bring this experience to bear and help the city recover and, of course, build back stronger, as Bridget said, the new normal that will be quite a bit of time from now, but we'll get there. Next slide, please. So this graphic is one you may have seen before. It's one that FEMA publishes, and it's around the National Disaster Recovery Framework. Really, our approach aligns with that framework. This summarizes 3 overlapping temporal steps in the recovery life cycle, starting with short term, which is truly just the first days and weeks, and that's where the city is now, and then moving into intermediate weeks and months, and then the long term, as mentioned, will take months and many years for a full recovery, and that is based on our deep experience in this space. What we have underneath this graphic are just a few selected funding streams. The FEMA Public Assistance Program, as I mentioned, is a bar throughout all of those life cycle points, because that is a program that will take quite a bit to administer, but will be the bedrock reimbursement funding for infrastructure damage and hazard mitigation to protect that damaged infrastructure for the future. Next slide, please. And so just our last slide here is to summarize a bit of what Bridget already mentioned around our scope of work. Our scope of work will focus on FEMA Public Assistance Advisory and Program Implementation, which we are already doing. Individual assistance FEMA advisory support, which is funding that goes from FEMA directly to affected households and survivors. Hazard mitigation and grant support, including the FEMA Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which there's a webinar just later today with the state about that. Debris removal advisory support, especially now that the city is using the Army Corps. It needs some good advisory support to work with the Army Corps as it proceeds. Housing planning to identify the needs, the solutions, and the potential funding sources to meet those needs and realize those solutions. And ultimately, long-term recovery planning. This is a nonlinear process, as mentioned earlier. It is complex, but we will get there together, and we're here, and it's our honor and our goal to help the city avail itself of those financial resources it does need to recover and become more resilient to future disasters. Thank you.
Councilmember.
Thank you, Ari. 2 slides before that has the ARCs. I think it's slide 6. I've been trying to keep track and doing my homework. SBA loan funds and the locations for supporting our community are big factors that have come up as I've been helping constituents that are on location for long periods of time. So one of the big parts about this is that our disaster recovery centers are so far flung, and I know there's so much infrastructure required, but we have a large amount of our population that relies on transit. And my curiosity has been like, how do we make our locations more accessible? Because I think there was some conversation about going door to door and helping folks, or going to specific neighborhoods that we know we had neighborhood vulnerability indexes. But if that's happening, I haven't yet seen it. And so I'm hoping to elevate that concern.
And Councilmember Roney, thank you for that feedback. I do want to quickly note that we do have Hannah Vick with FEMA, who's going to give an overview that may be able to more specifically respond to that question. And she'll be going after we go through our recovery framework.
And then the second question I have would be around that small business administration loans. It seems to take up a lot of the time and the space in this work, understandably so, because we want to have a resilient economy and be able to support our businesses. But folks are also being denied loans. So do we have a plan for how we might shift business support if for some reason we don't end up with SBA funding? it's okay if we don't have an answer to that at this time.
I think we'll be able to
Yeah,
get
I
to
think-
that as we
well,
go through.
Yeah, I think at the conclusion of this presentation, I think we need to have a little bit of a discussion with council around sort of the medium and long-term planning efforts and what that looks like. And especially in these areas, as Kim raised an example, that it is not traditionally entirely housed within the city, but what is the city's role going to be related to these challenges. So, some of us are already doing a lot of work in these areas and trying to figure out how to get our arms around it and what's the best approach. And there's not exactly a playbook precisely. So I think we're going to need to have that conversation. I did have a couple of questions though for Haggerty. It looks like the way this presentation is broken up and what you presented is we're going to now go back. The next slide, we're going to go back to city staff. So I would like to ask you a few questions about this. And you correct me. Yep. Go ahead. Kim, did you have another question for Haggerty?
I still have the same question is, if what's going to happen is that we're going to contract with Haggerty to spend a lot of time supporting on small business administration loans, and if there continues to be no funding, then what I'm seeing is we need support. People are waiting in long lines, but the answer is a denial. Do we have a plan in place to shift Haggerty support if we need other solutions in the short and intermediate?
Yeah. Well, and I just thrown in my 2 cents here. Congress is going back into session on November 12th. They are expected to refund the SBA. So I see Ari's nodding his head. So, I'll be going with the delegation up to Washington on November 20th. We'll be working with our lobbyist up there to make the ask around this and several other things, obviously. My sense is the refunding of SBA is not controversial. I think it's a matter of timing. But definitely we need to know what to do if A, it doesn't happen, B, if it takes too long, and what other resources are there. We have put together a small business recovery guide with all the currently known resources in it outside of SBA loans, but they're not sufficient. The legislature did another $50 million in loans that is being administered through folks like Mountain BizWorks. There are other resources, but I mean, they're not sufficient to support our businesses.
Thank you for that. I also just hope that we can be nimble if we need to move things around.
Yeah. So I had some questions. So my understanding is that within the first 100 days of a disaster like this, FEMA will reimburse us for 100% of our expenditures. And we are on day 43, if my calculations are correct. And day 100 would be January 5. My question would be, in terms of Haggerty's scope of work, are you helping make sure that every dollar we're spending, we're documenting, appropriately so that we can fully get reimbursed for all of our expenditures? For an example, my understanding is we can get all overtime pay for city staff, but we have to document it and keep track of it in such a way that FEMA will allow for the reimbursement of such. That's just an example. I know we're rebuilding our water system. We're doing, debris removal. We have expenses related to security. We have all kinds of costs. And I just want to understand if part of what the work is that's happening here with Haggerty is to make sure we do everything we need to do to fully recover those costs. And then what else are we going to do before day 100 that we need to make sure we get in there so that we do get the cost reimbursed? So that's kind of a big picture question there. And I see some heads shaking. So maybe someone could speak to that generally.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mayor. I'm happy to answer that. So FEMA actually will be funding 100% for the first 180 days. So it pushes through into the late March, and here's where the devil is a bit in the details. The specific work that they're reimbursing for 180 days is referred to as emergency work. So you had mentioned debris removal, that counts. Also some emergency protective measures that are happening by the city and performed by city staff, as you mentioned, some overtime. Those are the types of work that FEMA will reimburse 100% if eligible. There's other types of work. You mentioned infrastructure recovery that is not at 100%. That is something that is up to the president and the FEMA administrator. There are details there and mechanisms, but right now it is just the emergency work that's eligible for 100% for 180 days. And that's about when those costs are actually incurred and when the work is performed. So work performed to date is under consideration for that eligibility and reimbursement. Yes, we are working with the city manager's office and the departments to help provide guidance around how reimbursement works and how to structure documentation such that it puts the city in the best position possible for that reimbursement. I hope that answers your overall question.
Yeah, so for us, it's 180 days. And so does that extend, if I understood you correctly, so FEMA parts A and B are debris removal and security, but for the other ones, CD, whatever they are, they're rebuilding your utility system, so on and so forth. You're saying there it is not necessarily 100% for those pockets. So when I have talked to the FEMA administrator, she talked about how it's normally a 75-25% share, but when you hit a threshold, and I don't know what that is, you go to 90-10 automatically under the rules. You just flip over to 90-10. And that, so it'd be good to know what that threshold is and whether we're going to hit that. We are going to be meeting with her tomorrow. So, and maybe you are too, or somebody from Hagerty is. So it'd be good to have that discussion. I understand that we can look to the state for that match. If we need a 10% match, we can also look to other federal funds for the 10% match. So we would need help in identifying those funds so that we're not leaving any stone unturned, that all of the resources that are out there. And I understand this is not an area that is normally within the wheelhouse of a city or a county for that matter. And so we have to have a Hagerty, and I understand you all are a great firm to work with. We have to have, and the county has someone they're working with. We really have to bring in the expertise to help us navigate this, because you just can't go to graduate school on disaster relief regulations in a matter of days. So it would be, I just want to make sure I have enough information so I'm making the right asks on the political level to make sure we get the resources we need, but also that city staff are able to apply for and leverage every possible matching fund. That might just be a matter of, well, there's this pocket of money that the EPA offers. You just got to apply under this grant. Here it is. So those kinds of opportunities. One other question I had is, staff has put together a list of needs, and we have it in the form of a letter that's been presented to Congress, to various members of Congress. We have presented it to state legislators. I believe we've provided it to the governor, because the governor has put together, he doesn't call it a recovery plan, but I understand he calls it something else. But I believe that the required recovery plan that the state has to put forward before Congress will act. I know when Steve Scalise, the majority leader, was here last week, he talked about the governor needing to put together that plan. Have you all been able to look at our list of needs that we have presented to the North Carolina legislature, to the Congress, and to the governor? And if not, staff, can you send that to Hagerty? And can you, Hagerty, tell us if we need to tweak that list, if we need to adjust it at all, if it's all good? Rachel's chiming in.
Note that the most recent version of the letter that was prepared on October 9th was done collaboratively with the Hagerty team. Sherry Blanton, who's on here actually helped type some of the portions of it and coordinate
Good.
with Jade and a cross-departmental team.
And can we share that out to council? And I know we're going to try to figure out, I know we have already stuff on our website about recovery information. And I hope we eventually have kind of a dashboard website that so people can track kind of every little inch of the recovery process. But be able to share that out to the community. That information again will be presented to Congress when they go into session later this month, and by this delegation that I'll participate in to go up there. It'll also include other towns like Lake Lure and Chimney Rock and Canton, other representatives. So just in, trying to make sure all of this recovery process is as transparent as possible and also done as effectively as possible, I would say. Okay, so that's my, I think those are my questions for now. I might think of some more. Yeah, thanks.
Sure. So let me try to work backwards there. I think Rachel addressed the letter, which, yes, we had a chance to work on collaboratively with the city. And yes, we have been reviewing the data that underpin that letter and the dollars that went into the ask there. And sort of a branch off of what I was discussing earlier, our first order of business is to vet, use City Manager Campbell's word, to very closely vet that list for first what may be FEMA public assistance PA reimbursable. Now, that is not an answer that will be known to the city for quite some time because there's a arduous process of documentation and submission and discussion with the state and with FEMA. But yes, we are looking at that list first to see where FEMA PA can cover some of those needs and may even be able to build in some hazard mitigation funding on top of the infrastructure needs. To go back to your question about the 75-25 cost share, yes. So traditionally under the Stafford Act, the federal government pays 75% of the PA program, locals pay 25%. As already discussed, that's changed for the emergency work portion, that's 100% for 180 days. The other categories of work you were listing, yes, that's grouped together, roughly known as permanent work. It's oftentimes exactly as it sounds, infrastructure recovery. Yes, right now that is 75% federal, local 25%. But two key details there. In federal regulations, there is a specific trigger that allows the FEMA administrator and president the discretionary authority to increase the federal share to 90%, exactly as you said. That is a state level trigger, which means the estimated public assistance at the entire state of North Carolina for the Hurricane Helene recovery would have to hit that trigger, which I believe is just south of $2 billion. I do not believe there's a formal trigger hit yet, but there's indications that it could get there. But yes, that's the regulatory trigger for the 90-10 split. And then if that happens, FEMA has the authority to determine if that goes across all categories of work for the rest of the declaration's period of performance. In terms of covering the local share, I do not know specifically the state's process. I know in the past the state has covered portions or all of the local share. And I also know in early October, the General Assembly passed $250 million specifically for the state to use to help local governments cover that local share. I hope I addressed all your questions. Did I? Okay. Thank you.
If I might, I just would add that support for a dashboard. I know sometimes it gets harder as the stack grows, but if we could start soon while the list is growing, I think it would really help to build trust and to bring the public along with us. I know the public really appreciated us bringing them along with the water scenario, and with the projects and the budgeting would also be a great asset to our community.
And thank you, Councilmember Roney. That's actually a great segue into our next section of slides. And of course, we've still got the Hagerty team on the call. If you have additional questions for them as we go, you can go to the next slide, please. So this organizational chart that you're seeing is intended to depict our 90-day recovery framework to address the city's operational roles and responsibilities as our efforts transition from that immediate emergency response to that short-term, intermediate-term, and long-term recovery process. We were intentional in identifying this as a 90-day structure because we want to give predictability to staff, but we also want to send a message that, similar to what Bridget shared in key takeaways and Ari just articulated, this will be an iterative and cyclical process that we will continue to refine as we go. Deborah mentioned earlier today that we're learning as we implement, and that's where it's so helpful to have the resources from Hagerty. And that's where we also are so appreciative of the continued support that we get from FEMA and our other federal partners. And at the conclusion of today's presentation, as I mentioned earlier, you will be hearing from Hannah Vick with FEMA on our coordination and feedback from her on our recovery efforts. We've loosely structured this recovery framework around the recovery support functions that FEMA's National Disaster Recovery Framework has identified as key areas of recovery assistance. I also want to note that these functional support groups, or RSGs, as Bridget referenced them earlier, are closely aligned with the structure that Buncombe County has established. City and county staff are working closely together on the development and implementation of recovery-related strategies. So a great example is the work that Emily Ball referenced earlier that she's doing in collaboration with Lacey Hoyle at Buncombe County, as well as the continuum of care on shelter planning. So what you see in the boxes below the recovery coordination team are our recovery support groups. Each recovery support group has a team lead who's responsible for planning, organizing, and communicating the work of their team. Each recovery support group also has an executive sponsor from the city manager's office who will provide executive oversight and help set the priorities for the work of those recovery support groups. Bridget Herring and I make up the recovery coordination team, and we're responsible for the development and continued refinement of this recovery framework. And we also serve as the contract managers for our engagement with Hagerty, and will ultimately be responsible in collaboration with the city manager's office, as well as with city council, on the successful development, engagement, and implementation of those short, intermediate, and long-term goals heading to that long-term recovery plan. So what you see in these boxes are 6 operational recovery support groups that have a team lead identified in the org chart. We have housing, debris, water, infrastructure, economic recovery, and art and cultural resources. We also have what we're referring to as functional support areas, which are cross-cutting in nature and provide support to all of the operational areas. These functional support groups include cost recovery. Major focus there is that public assistance that Ari just described, community capacity building and long-term recovery planning, administrative support, as well as data and communications. In addition to the team lead and the executive sponsor, each team has a dedicated administrative support, a communication support representative, as well as dedicated Hagerty liaison who will attend team meetings, be embedded with that team, and assist with goal setting and provide both financial and technical assistance to the team. It's important to note that this structure is brand new. It was just rolled out to the management team on Monday. And when I say management team, I'm referencing our team of department directors. The teams are in the process of forming. Some are just now having their kickoff meetings this week, and some are scheduled for next week. In the very near future, we plan to roll out enhanced communication and data visualization. So to your point, Councilmember Roney, we too are very desirous to have a better dashboard, both for internal management purposes as well as for transparency with the public. So that is something that we're looking at. How can we bring on additional resources to get that dashboard up and running as quickly as possible? And I'll just let you all know my future desired perfect state is if we can implement something similar to what Maui has. If you go to mauirecovers.org, that'll just let you know where our desired future state is in terms of dashboard as well as communication strategy. And we are coordinating with the Maui team to get some best practices from them and also get ideas from them on resources. Also, if you watch Buncombe County Commission's meeting last week, where Jeremiah Leroy, who's serving as the Deputy Recovery Coordinator for Buncombe County, Rachel Sawyer is serving as the Recovery Coordinator for Buncombe County. But during the meeting last week, Jeremiah went through the county's recovery framework and briefly touched on the concept of a blue ribbon advisory committee. And the thought process is this committee would provide additional stakeholder input into the development of recovery strategies. And city staff conceptually agree with this idea. And we are in conversation with county staff about options to either have a joint committee or closely connect stakeholder groups. So it was already referenced earlier. Deborah mentioned this is the first city council agenda briefing that we've had since September 19th. So we are going to get into a regular cadence with you all of having updates related to recovery. November and December are unique months for us in that we only have one regular business meeting in each month. So we are planning on scheduling special briefings with the first one being on November 21st, focused on recovery so that we can give you updates. And so our plan is that our next recovery briefing, which is not yet on your calendars, but will be occurring on November 21st, we will have additional details on this concept of an advisory committee for recovery and additional information on how we're coordinating with Buncombe County. Yes, Mayor.
Hey, and my schedule is ruining everything. So I'll be in DC on the 21st for that trip. So if we could do that briefing, and yay to the cadence of the briefings. I do think that's very critical, probably for us to continue these regular briefings through the 180-day process, because we're, anyway, if we could do that, well, first one on the 19th, that would be fabulous.
Yep,
and
for that feedback, we'll have Talia and Katie work with you all on your calendars and make sure that we can identify a date and time that works for the full city council.
And also the swearing in ceremony on December 3rd will probably have to be December 2nd for similar reasons. So stay tuned, everybody.
Okay, Maggie, want to make sure you heard that. So we'll need
we've been talking. I've already rocked her world with this. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, so we will then transition to our next slide, please. And this slide provides additional details on the roles that I just described organizationally in our recovery framework. And in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over providing additional details on these roles and responsibilities. So if we could please go to the next slide. So Hagerty, as we've already mentioned, is a critical partner. They've provided us much needed expertise as we transition and begin implementation of our recovery efforts. And since you all just heard the great overview from Ari, I'm not going to provide any additional context around the role that they're providing as our contractor, but did want to reference what we've seen in the research and in the consultation we've had with both FEMA as well as with our partners at Hagerty, some of the roles that we could really get some assistance from the mayor and city council as we transition into recovery. So supporting the city manager's office and recovery support team, as well as the emergency operations center staff as requested. And I do want to note, because we are still in this transitional period, our emergency operations center is still activated, and they are doing the criticality analysis regularly to determine how long that emergency operations center needs to remain operational. But during this transition period, as we start up our recovery efforts, we do still have our EOC activated. Another role for mayor and city council is supporting our communication and helping us identify those priorities to the community as we state those needs to you all. And then of course, coordinating with our state and federal elected officials. Already referenced that we want to have an improved cadence in terms of how we communicate with you. So receiving those regular briefings from staff and other review materials provided by staff to stay updated on recovery efforts. And then sharing community concerns that you've heard. You all have done a great job of that so far and ask that you continue doing so. Hopefully the council question and answer spreadsheet that we've prepared for you is continuing to work, but I know several of you have been sending emails and texts as well. We just want to make sure that we're coordinating those and getting responses to you as quickly as possible, and more importantly, have a better feel for the concerns that you're hearing from the community. And then continuing to support intergovernmental coordination with Buncombe County through your relationships that you have with those elected officials, as well as promoting a consistent message related to our recovery efforts among community members. And that, again, is where it's so important that we continue to provide you those regular email updates and then improve that frequency of giving you specific briefings related to our recovery efforts. Next slide, please. So these are some of our immediate next steps. And while this is not a comprehensive list, we have identified some of the key things that we're going to be focusing on over the next couple of weeks. So as I mentioned in a previous slide, the recovery support groups are still being formed, and over the next 2 weeks, all groups will conduct their internal initial kickoff meetings. Staff will continue to send those city council update emails on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then, as I mentioned, starting with today's briefing, staff plans to provide bi-monthly recovery briefings, with our next briefing scheduled sometime around November 21st, not necessarily on November 21st, so that we can sync up calendars. And we also plan to provide details to the public, a very similar presentation to what you're hearing today, at Tuesday's City Council meeting. And we can provide updates at future City Council meetings through the City Manager's report as well. Staff will also continue to participate in county press briefings on an as-needed basis. And for the time being, that cadence will remain Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And staff is also developing a more robust communication and engagement strategy for recovery to keep the City Council, the organization, and the entire community updated and engaged on our recovery efforts. And I'll note that we've identified both Dawa Hitch in our CAPE department, as well as Holly Barham in our IT department. They're going to be working closely with Bridget, myself, the full City Manager's office, on developing a more robust communication and engagement strategy. And we do plan on working with Haggerty for those efforts as well. Also, work will continue on the development of disaster recovery committee development and the concept of that blue ribbon task force. And again, at our next briefing, we do plan to share more details with you, as well as seek some feedback on that potential advisory committee. And then we are also working with the finance department to identify a date for the City Council's annual priority setting retreat. We do want to have that a little bit earlier than usual, just given where we are with recovery and all that has changed in our community over the course of the last month. Next slide. So this is the last slide that I have. I know that was a really high-level overview of our organization's recovery support framework. Again, that the intended time period is 90 days, and that's just to give staff predictability, and then also to give us space so that we can iterate and continue to improve as we go. But I'm happy to answer questions that you may have related to our recovery support framework, or if there are no questions, I can then introduce Hannah Vick with FEMA. Councilmember Turner.
Thank you. Can you go back a couple slides to the council rules, please?
Sure.
So this is helpful, knowing where to plug in. There's a broader kind of need that I'm seeing, but I don't know how best to plug it in or where it is, and maybe you can help inform that timeline. Just the general role of council and policy and land use management. My brain is already thinking about floodways, riverways, building back, how, greenways, what should be changed. And I'm wondering where that fits into this, since it will likely include lots of input from the community and so on. And if there are, if there's anything available already that we could receive, like if you all have developed map layers or some kind of information around impacts that have occurred that were outside what we thought was the flood, anything that can help us start forming that and talking with folks would be helpful to me. I just don't know where that fits in this.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Rachel.
So that's going to fit most neatly under our economic recovery team, and that is being led by Steph Dahl intentionally because of the tie-ins to land use. And so that team is hosting a kickoff next week, and there are some materials already readily available that we can work on making available to you, council members.
Who's on that team, Rachel?
I'll pull it up for you in just a second.
But doesn't include council. It's a staff-led team.
Right now, it's a staff-led team, and that's a really important point. So we're starting with our staff-led teams, but very soon thereafter, we are looking at broader stakeholder engagement. And so some of that is already happening with different groups. So housing is an example where there's a county task force that's already been established. And then through Thrive and other affordable housing partners, we already have touch points as we're developing our housing strategy. So each of these recovery support groups are at kind of different stages of developing those connections with stakeholder groups, but a very short-term action item after that initial internal kickoff will be developing those communication and engagement strategies and making sure we're plugging in the correct stakeholder groups.
And we will be resuming council committee meetings in January, so that will be where the council gets more integrated.
But can I, on this topic and to Sage's point, I have a suggestion, because I think what I see in this presentation, and thank you all, this is good information. I think that, kind of resuming business as usual with the council committees and all that sort of thing, all the regular functions need to resume. And we're going to have a retreat in January. But what I kind of see two parts to this recovery. One is you guys are doing great. It's the clean this place up, pick up this debris. We're going to have to build roads. We're going to have to build bridges. We're going to have to clean up our parks. We're going to have to do all this sort of transactional stuff that doesn't really need council's involvement directly, other than we need to be updated. We need to be good communicators and so on and so forth. And we need to understand the funding piece of it and what we're getting, what we're spending money on, and how well we're doing with making sure we get reimbursed 100% for the first 80 days. But then there's these other aspects of recovery that are a little more difficult to get your arms around. The recovery of our community, our people, and our businesses, our small businesses, also our future land planning, and how does this change this, our relationship with the DOT, and how are we going, we've got roads that are closed. Swananoa River Road, where just putting everything back like it was probably doesn't make any sense right now, and is not going to make any sense. And then what are we looking at for the River Arts District and for these other, and as you mentioned, some of it is land planning, some of it is not. But what I would suggest we do, so that staff understands what council's expectation is in this medium and long-term recovery process, is to have a council work session, not a retreat, but a work session, maybe in December, so we can get some consensus from council regarding what we want to be participating in for aspects that are firmly recovery aspects that involve policy making decisions. So again, a lot of it's around economic recovery and land planning and those kinds of buckets. But I think council needs to have that discussion and get some consensus around that, so staff has the 4 head nods they need to understand our expectations, and then set that stage. And then yes, that can also parlay into our retreat. But our retreat is also like, what are we going to do around our budgeting process and staff pay and other things that are more that we'd be doing every year that aren't unique to a recovery process. So that's just my suggestion. I don't know what folks think of that, but I know council's very eager to understand more about their role and meaningfully participating in this recovery, rather than just communicating out to the community information that we're being fed.
And if I may, just to complete what I really was getting at, I think the idea of December and meeting is great. I think in the absence of us having a collective plan as a council and how we will operate, that we will all be out here on our own. I'm already meeting with businesses and how they're rebuilding. And I think
We're all-
we've seen that in the past, staff can get really ahead on a plan, bring it to council, and then it'd be like torn apart. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm bringing this up preemptively, also speaking out for it's not just housing. I heard a housing response, but businesses in general are having to make do or die decisions right now. And we are not offering them guidance. And I'm not saying anybody is not doing enough. I'm just saying this is a piece that hasn't been taken on and really needs to in a timely manner. And I really also want to just remind folks, I will not be able to attend an in-person retreat in January. So please consider a different date if you can.
I'll just jump
Well,
on the same thread of I would love a work session to talk about our role, what the high level recovery priorities look like. I mean, I think the way that you structured the staff team makes a lot of sense. But I think that if we can start discussing this in December, we can also talk about council's governance and the council team to do this. Like I'm ready to jump in today. Like I'm eager for that if December's as soon as we can do it, I understand, but I certainly don't want to wait till the new year to jump into what is our team structure, what are our priorities at the council level, because I worry, like the slide that was showing kind of the org structure, y'all are really diving into setting up the management structure, but we need to understand the governance so that, as Sage is saying, we don't want to put y'all in the position where you decide the recipe, you decide how long to bake it, you ask us to take it out of the oven and we say, that's not where we were going. And so I'm not sure where that lives. I love the idea of a work session. I could see that being a half day. I think there's a lot to talk through. And I think it'd be great for us to help plan it and really determine what the agenda is so that you all aren't guessing. I would love to be talking about what our long-term recovery priorities are. I would love us to start getting into some of those goals, because I think that similar to as the mayor was saying, bundling that with a traditional council retreat, I think weighs it down so much. There's so much pressing need. The other thing that I'm curious about is where community engagement lives. I know that coming up with a long-term community engagement strategy takes a lot of effort and work, but can we as councilwomen organize a town hall and just use this time while staff is doing amazing work preparing and setting this framework in motion? Could we start now this month and next having some town halls that we pull together so that we can start getting that input? And it's not the same type of community engagement that staff would do on explicit policy stuff. It's just like, hey, y'all, how are you experiencing this? Because as Sage mentioned, we're all talking to so many citizens at a time, but it's a little bifurcated. So maybe that comment is less to staff and more to council. Like, anyone want to work on that together? Because I think that would be really useful, especially as we're seeing staff tell us there's a Herculean amount of work they need to get structured and set into motion. And so is there stuff that we can collaborate on to help us be informed? So there's a lot of different thoughts there. I guess in summary, I'd say I really love the work session idea for us to set our council priorities and to do that as soon as possible. I'd love to talk as councilwomen of like, can we start some community engagement now as ourselves and initiate that as a team? That would be cool to talk about. And then the last thing I'll mention is around the county's language of a blue ribbon task force. I love the idea of us collaborating on that with the county. I know that there'll be county functions that won't always directly overlap with the city and vice versa, but I think the coordination is really essential so we have a unified, more regional approach to this. I'd love to see electeds and community members on that. The county has that structure for some of their committees already, and I think that's a cool structure. And perhaps this work session in December can also start to another priority. We could discuss what are some of our objectives for a task force like that, so that again, we as peers on council have a chance to kind of get ourselves aligned and discussed and do that while the public's available to see those conversations through a meeting. So.
Okay, I guess I will also jump in then. I wanted to start with first saying thank you. I know that we are all survivors of Hurricane Helene, and so seeing staff jump in and bring this initial framework forward, it took a lot of time and energy, and I just want to acknowledge that. Also, we can keep working on accessibility of documents. That slide 12 that came in our packet is not a readable PDF. So even like searching our documents and making them translatable and accessible is going to be so important. So I just wanted to like re-elevate that. I wonder what it looks like, and I'm going to say this again because I think we did a really good job early on, bringing the community along during hard conversations. The water was a challenging conversation to have. And sometimes the public felt we overshared, but we definitely brought everyone along. We didn't do that with the debris sites, and I think we missed an opportunity to help bring the public along. So when it comes to having that community engagement, we've heard from other disaster survivor cities, it's everything. It can be your make or break. But I think I'm also hearing my colleagues talk about when we have done the community engagement last or the council check-in last, and it's like, no, we're going in the wrong direction. That would just be such a waste of everyone's time. And we don't have time to waste. So it does seem to me that I wanted to join the chorus saying, let's get community engaged. The Blue Ribbon Task Force, yes. But I did reach out to colleagues asking about, like, we've paused our advisory boards, and I think we need all hands on deck. So whether it's a hub of having our planning and our engagement, we also haven't mentioned equity once today. And I know it's something that we are committed to, but it's not in any of our documents for today. It's not in any of our planning documents. I'd see missing whole departments. So we need a just recovery. But we're also hearing from disaster survivor cities that if you have documents that already have community engagement, this is a great time to implement. We know our neighborhood vulnerability index scores. So I'm just like, where is our equity and inclusion department? Where I see Dawa and our communications team looped in. But I just wanted to make sure that while we were in fluster mode and emergency and urgency mode, that we didn't forget about some of our core values and make sure that we can bring people along, because I certainly don't want us to get moving in a direction, spend that time and energy, and then have to spend more time and energy rerouting. And I hope that it certainly is offered today with a spirit of collaboration and wanting us to stay unified, but it's just going to be really, really hard to be delivering the information to the community if we're missing some of those key tenets of our work.
And those are all points very well made. And I do want to note that while you saw team leads, that does not mean that the teams are not also comprised of representatives from all city departments. Our core values of inclusion, accountability, collaboration, and trustworthiness are at the foundation of all that we do as an organization. And then, of course, using our commitment to sustainability, our commitment to equity and inclusion, those are lenses that we are using throughout this process. So appreciate you naming that, Councilmember Roney, and want to let you know that we are being very intentional in those efforts.
Well,
I also, yep.
And we haven't done that when we've done like releasing critical water infrastructure information to a small group of business owners. Like, pause, like let's stay together in this. I feel like it just puts staff in such a terrible situation while we're all working so hard. So I know we have our core values, and I appreciate their name, to just really hope that we'll stay in our plans.
Yep, and those points are, again, all well made from all of you. To keep with the cake baking analogy, we want to make sure we're baking the right cake from a community perspective, as well as from a city council priority and policy setting perspective. So the more touch points we can have with you, the better. And we will certainly at our next briefing kind of talk to you about what that strategy entails, leading towards a work session, hopefully in December. So If there are no other immediate comments or feedback related to the recovery support framework that we just outlined, again, that's our operational recovery support framework, I am pleased to announce or introduce to you the Federal Coordinating Officer with FEMA, Hannah Vick, who's going to give you an overview of her recovery efforts. And Talia or Katie, I'm not sure who's driving, you can take the slides down now.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Very much appreciate the invitation to speak with you, give you a briefing, a very high-level briefing on some of our FEMA activities, as well as certainly offer the opportunity to answer any questions. But by way of introductions, again, my name is Hannah Vick, and Assistant Federal Coordinating Officer, and I'm just focused on Buncombe County, the City of Asheville, and the municipalities within the county. I've been here for about 3 weeks now, and I just want to say that seeing firsthand the spirit of community, the spirit of resilience, the fortitude, all of those things make me very honored to be a part of this recovery, and very much looking forward to continuing to work with your team and to see the progress that's going to be made. For this particular briefing, I have some prepared remarks. Again, they're very high level, but I also wanted to give you a big picture overview, get into a little bit of the recovery space on what FEMA is doing for the City of Asheville, but then of course answering any questions that you might have. So first of all, I want to start off by saying that FEMA has about 300 responders in Buncombe County right now. We just opened up an office a little bit south, I think the southwest part of the city, and that office really serves as a hub for not just the FEMA responders that are focused on this county, but also the counties in Western North Carolina. And our team here in Asheville can get support. We have reach back support that we can go back to Hickory, Raleigh, Durham, also go back to FEMA headquarters in Washington, D.C., supporting the overall recovery with the recognition that here in the City of Asheville is an engine for a lot of the other activities that are going on in the western part of the state. And it's my job, the reason why I'm here is to make sure that the FEMA priorities are aligned with your priorities. I've been working with the city team on a daily basis to ensure that we're pushing forward on the priorities, on our shared priorities, which are water, debris, housing, and the long-term recovery planning that Rachel just briefed. And I have been very impressed with the expertise and the dedication that I've already seen from your team in terms of asking the right questions, right? Working on the framework that's really going to set you up for the long-term dividends that will be necessary in the months and the years to come. So first of all, I'll just say on the FEMA side, especially when it comes to water, I will tell you that our biggest priority right now for the city and for the county is the restoration of potable water. So of course, we're working very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. We've tasked them not only with the larger interim solution. I know that there's so many individuals who have so much more expertise on the water side than I do. So I won't endeavor to get into those particular details, but I do want to give assurances that the water situation is a very, very tip-top priority for FEMA. Working with the Army Corps of Engineers, have a subject matter expert embedded with the city water department, and then also pushing forward with solutions with the Army Corps of Engineers, their contracting, and the way in which they will actually build out the longer term interim solution that we're looking toward in the next, I would say the next weeks and months. Won't spend a lot of time talking about that detail, but I just want to make sure that we let you know that we understand that the water situation is critical. It's absolutely essential for all of the other the recovery elements to move forward. The other thing that I'll talk about is the debris front. And over the last week, I know that we've been working with the city to accelerate the debris removal here at the city, especially with the right-of-way debris removal. And we're part of the ongoing discussions with the Army Corps of Engineers, making sure that we all stay aligned and that we're all staying aligned on the timetables. Additional conversations are coming up or already underway regarding waterways and private property debris removal, as well as the commercial debris removal. And the debris removal that we're doing, of course, with the Army Corps of Engineers is what we call direct federal assistance, which means that there is not a cost to the city. As Ari mentioned, as you already have talked about, the public assistance program is really all about, is the big is the big project function that will allow a lot of the that reimbursement process for not only the debris removal and the emergency protective measures, or those short-term actions that you took in the immediate afterward of the storm, but also thinking through the longer-term infrastructure rebuilding. FEMA's public assistance program, as has already been mentioned, is a reimbursement program, and it's also on a cost share basis. And we have already assigned a particular person who is there with you at the city to start building out these projects. And what they are able to do is really look at firsthand, listening to the conversations from the staff, also hearing directly about what's most important here. And then from there, being able to take back to our FEMA staff and saying, this is the project, this is how it's actually going to be developed. And then making sure that we're maximizing every dollar that the city is eligible for. So that one-on-one support is extraordinarily important to us, and we will continue to provide that through the duration of the disaster. Not just with your one person, but there will be a whole team of individuals supporting you with the city of Asheville. And then I also want to talk about housing and our individual assistance program, especially since I assume that there are probably quite a few questions that you're getting from your constituents about, hey, I called FEMA or I received a letter. So I just want to kind of give some overview, and then of course I can answer questions when we're done. So we do know that housing is always a top priority during any kind of recovery. And I want to assure all of you that we are working with individuals and households on a case-by-case basis. And we also make decisions about eligibility and what type of assistance for each household on a case-by-case basis. So first step, of course, is the registration process with FEMA. I believe that you're already familiar with that in terms of registering online or by phone. But once an individual or once a household actually is registered and into the system, we can go about finding those short-term or longer-term solutions. So far, we've got about 2,000 individuals, or forgive me, 2,000 households in the city of Asheville that have been approved for FEMA individual assistance, and we've provided so far about $4 million directly to those families. The money that we've been provided so far is meant to take care of some serious needs, pay for a temporary place to live, make home repairs, and replace essential personal property. And as we continue to complete the home inspections, we can approve survivors for more and more, especially if their situation changes. So for example, if they have one housing situation right now, but they need to make a change for whatever reason, then they can come back to FEMA, say my situation has changed, and then we can reevaluate them for eligibility on receiving additional dollars. So of the $4 million that has been given out just here in the city of Asheville, a little more than $3 million is for things like temporary housing, lodging, and other needs, even if you're currently staying with friends and family. It also includes other types of assistance like transportation costs, cleaning costs, personal property losses, and other essential items. And then in addition, across the entire county, we've got about 1,600 individuals that FEMA is paying for their hotel stay. Those individuals in hotels, we know that it's not an optimal solution, especially for families. And so we're working one-on-one to identify the next step of that transitional housing plan for them as they identify what works out best for them and their particular and unique case. And then the other thing that I'll mention is that we do very much recognize that the rental units in this area might not be, there might be questions about affordability. And so FEMA just last week was able to provide a doubling of the amount that we are willing to pay for rental assistance for households, which means that we use the HUD fair market rate for rental schedule. And based on that for the city of Asheville, we actually double that number. And then that is the amount of money that we can provide for those that are eligible for rental assistance. I'm so sorry, my throat is going. And finally, also want to mention, as I believe it was Ms. Roney that mentioned earlier about the disaster recovery centers, we know that sometimes it's really, really important for individuals to have the opportunity to speak face to face, to talk about their case and to talk perhaps about a letter or something else that they received from FEMA. So we currently have the one DRC at the Cane Creek Pool, and then we have 2 mobile DRCs, or disaster recovery centers, that switch between the Bee Tree Fire Station and the Buncombe County Sports Complex. The Cane Creek Pool Disaster Recovery Center is in a parking lot right now, and we are looking to shift that. So I hear you loud and clear in terms of identifying a place on transportation routes and public transportation routes, and I will certainly take that back. Additionally, the other thing that I will mention is that an individual or a household does not need to visit a DRC in order to receive assistance. If any of your constituents are concerned about that, the same assistance is provided if you call or use the online app, whatever it is that works out best for them. However, we do provide the assistance, or we provide the availability of the disaster recovery centers to offer that face-to-face conversation. And then also, as noted, we have 12 disaster survivor assistance teams spread out throughout the community, knocking on doors or being at fixed sites that will help people register and answer their questions about FEMA assistance. So, and the whole point of all of this individual assistance is to find a safe and sanitary place for individuals to stay, especially as they make decisions for the long-term recovery process that we know that the families are looking at. Whether those are short-term, temporary needs, or the long-term decisions that need to be made on a household-by-household basis. And then finally, the last thing that I just want to mention is that we understand the priority of economic recovery. By statute, FEMA is limited on what it is that we can do for the private sector. However, our focus right now is on those enabling functions that allow, that really underpin economic recovery, including rebuilding infrastructure, removing debris, making sure that families and individuals have a place to live, and then, restoring the potable water and other essentials. All of those things are key drivers, and that's what we're focused on right now. Lastly, though, the recovery framework that Rachel was able to brief really aligned with the National Disaster Recovery Framework. And we have individuals and experts that have partnerships in collaboration with other federal partners that can bring federal resources to bear. And we are working very closely with both Rachel as well as other individuals within the city structure to bring those other federal partners to here to meet with you, to show you what other kind of federal assistance, whether they're loans or grants, other kind of resources available to you. And more to come on that, especially as the framework is built out. We want to support in any way that we can. So finally, I'd like to say that that FEMA is very much just one part of a much, much larger team. Recovery will take time. I think Bridget earlier said that it is not linear, it's iterative, and we're committed to being here. And I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you might have. I'm so sorry, my throat is going.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all that information. I am curious, this is kind of a two-part question, and possibly for Haggerty as well. Earlier I mentioned, like, how can we be working on policy and build back and stuff, and there's some overlap in what was just shared and what I'm seeing and hearing in the community. So we've got, it sounds like 200 people roughly, either in a hotel or a shelter, and we've got opportunity in the city to maybe help with that in ways, but I'm not sure where this role is. It might be a Haggerty thing. Do we as a community need to be looking at alternative opportunities? Like, currently in the city of Asheville, you cannot have someone living in an RV in your driveway. It's against the rules. Can we allow that for 6 months or 18 months or whatever? Are there things like that that we can be doing to help house folks? If it's a temporary power pole and a facility of rented bathrooms and a fleet of FEMA trailers or something, what more can we do to get these 1,800 or so people housed? I mean, it comes to mind that along transit is great, but thousands of people have lost cars, so they can't maneuver. So we need them kind of centralized. And now we have all these businesses hiring, and we could get people back to work. But any ideas on how we can better assist? Is this stuff you're working on?
And I know that I'm sure Ari will have a couple of things as well. I will say a couple of different things in response to your question. So the first is that we're very much plugged in with the housing recovery task force that the county has set up. I know that there's a lot of different pieces to looking holistically at how housing is thought of on that very short term, essential kind of way, that medium term, and then that longer term housing solutions. And so breaking up the different lines of effort, right? Like if there is somebody that you know of right now who is living in an RV and it's not safe, like we need to know that, and we need that to go into a certain line of effort. But if there is this group of people, like just like you're saying, this 1,600 that are in a hotel, what is it that we're going to do there? And then, of course, thinking about that longer term strategy as part of the city's overall plan for the future. FEMA's programs are very much focused on that immediate need, getting a person's somewhere safe and sanitary, and then that medium term kind of solution. So for example, with the 1,600 that are in hotels right now, we have caseworkers that will call those individuals on a regular basis and say, tell me about your situation, right? And they might say things like, well, I might be able to stay with friends and family next week, but I'm concerned about 2 weeks from now, right? And so it's that kind of granular, like unique, this is my situation and what it is that I need. And through that case by case basis, then we're able to look at eligibility. Hey, can we get you into a rental apartment? Or perhaps there's another possibility for a longer term housing solution. So that's how that is working. In terms of the other questions that you have though about changes to the city policies, or especially about the way in which FEMA does not provide eligibility for example, somebody who does not have an address. There are certain things that we can do, but we leverage very much the nonprofit community, our partnership with the American Red Cross to match up those resources for those particular individuals and households. But the other items that you mentioned in terms of what can we do on the city side, I defer to Ari.
Okay. And let me just layer one thing in for Ari response too, because council, we had talked amongst ourselves about the idea of short-term rentals and those that are grandfathered in. There was a request from some folks who have this grandfathered status that I think the rule is that if you switch to long-term housing for more than 6 months, you lose your grandfathered status. And I had hoped that maybe we would reconcile that somehow with these guys can be long-term and be grandfathered later if they house someone that is currently displaced or lost their housing. But, those kind of things never got any ground because we're not meeting in committees and we're not, this is our first agenda briefing since the disaster. So I'm not sure how to help with this, but there are opportunities. So someone please guide us, maybe Ari.
So I'll try to answer, but I think, a lot of this does come down to city priorities and ability to suspend zoning and other planning needs in order to put an RV on a lot, I think was your example. Some of FEMA's programs are for rental assistance. The individual assistance program has rental assistance as part of that. There's also direct lease to the extent that FEMA has been coordinating to try to identify properties with direct lease opportunities. I'm actually not quite sure. I'm going to have to defer to other city staff on that.
And I think there's more about the direct lease program that I know that we can certainly provide. And if there's any assistance in terms of information about that, that we can push over, we're always happy to do that.
I see a hand up from Tracy Phillips. This is Councilmember Kim Roney, and I guess I'll ask so for some clarification, Hannah. You mentioned that based on the housing crisis that we had before this hurricane, that there were additional funds to help fill the gap in our housing needs. And I know, for example, we have folks who have rooms for rent that were short-term rentals, and I'm hearing that folks are trying to get leases, but they're having trouble matching up with the documents that are on the FEMA's website. One of the tools I'm hearing is that they have to apply for a sam.gov number first. If that is consistent information, it's not on the FEMA's website about this. So if there's a place that we can just get consistent, like step-by-step information, if you have a room and you want to house someone temporarily, you need to do this, then this, and this. It sounds like everyone needs to have a sam.gov number, and then they can apply for the FEMA assistance. It is not clear and consistent, but that would be another really big way to help. Also, if in that same location, there could be information about the eligible funds and caps of eligibility for, let's say, income amounts or rental amounts, per room amounts. We just really need one place where we can send everyone to. This is why people feel they have to go in person to talk to someone, because they're on the phone for long periods of time. And I'm watching folks sit for hours. I'm glad there's chairs. I'm just like, it seems like if we could have one place for information, that would be so helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I hear what you're saying, especially, during this extraordinarily difficult time for families, right? We want to make sure that the information flow is as crisp and clear as possible. I will, for clarification, just let you know that it's not that there's an extra pot of money for rental assistance. Instead, what we've done is we said, usually we will go to the HUD's fair market rate for rental units standard. And we go to that schedule and say, okay, a 1-bedroom in Asheville during steady state or during regular times, it would probably cost X amount of money, or a 2-bedroom would cost this money. 3-bedroom will cost this. But what we did is we said, due to the storm and due to the uniqueness of this community and where we are right now, and because we want to help as many people as we can, instead we're going to say the 1-bedroom, 200% above whatever it is that number is, right? We're going to offer that as the amount of rental assistance that we can directly put in the hand of the disaster survivor. And then the disaster survivor then can make the choice, can make the decisions about their next step in recovery, about finding a rental unit on their own. I will also say too that
so appreciate it. It's just like, I know that folks aren't able to find the unit that they can afford, and that will help. We just need like one central location. I'm reading
so the
all
central location, I will say, especially because, of course, just like you all, FEMA needs to provide the information in a particular way. We need to make sure that it is equitable, that it's translatable, right? Like that we are doing everything that we can. And so we push all of the information at disasterassistance.gov. We want any individual who has any questions about FEMA disaster assistance to go to disasterassistance.gov. Now, related to your question, though, about individuals who say, I have a room for rent, or maybe a vacation home for rent, right? Like, I'm interested in participating. I will take for action I think we have a fact sheet. And so I want to make sure that I do a little bit of digging and then find that for you, so that when you get questions about like, what do I do with this, this question, that you'll be able to point them in the right direction.
Thank you, Anna.
Antoinette, I don't know if you were, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead and jump in. First of all, as fate would have it, I've been volunteering as a FEMA navigator, helping people.
Oh, nice.
And I'm at a location right now, so that's why.
Is that with the Boost program?
Yes.
Okay,
yes. So I'm doing that right now. And I wanted to take an opportunity to convey to you the gratitude that folks I'm seeing are having for FEMA. A lot of people are getting a lot of help. And someone mentioned, and again, I was in and out because there are people coming through. I want to give people different locations they can go to, because yesterday we had great, we were able to get in through the number with FEMA really, really great yesterday. And I'm finding that after 7. So just people watching, so they'll know, you can go to the United Way building in the Elf space, the Covenant Community Church, which is on 11 Rocket Drive, Grace Covenant Presbyterian, which also has FEMA reps there as we speak, as well as Holiday Inn West, the Elf Room, 435 Smoky Park Highway. And I happen to be at the Tridestone Baptist Church, but we're here for another week and a half. Yeah. So just want to get that information out. Thanks.
Yeah. Antoinette, that is so awesome. Thank you so much for doing that. That's great. My only last question was whether or not, Hannah, yesterday was November 6th, the deadline for folks with housing to submit that they would like to be, potentially housing someone. Can that deadline be extended? Can it be reopened?
I'm not sure which deadline is that. Is that for the
landlord and multifamily program? Is on your disaster assistance as the deadline. Can we
It was
extend
on the disaster assistance website that I just mentioned everybody should go to. I apologize.
Stuff too, but I mean, I feel like you have a great resource there. There's just so much information in the community that it can be overwhelming. But if we could get that deadline pushed in light of some of this information that's being shared publicly today, you might see more participation.
Let me do this. Let me go back and talk with the team, see what we can do, and I'll follow up just as quickly as I can.
Okay, thank you. And one last thing for council, and I'll be quiet. If you are interested in us working on some policy things like allowing these short-term rentals to house people currently that have lost their homes, it's a policy move by council. We don't have committees meeting. This is our chance to say, I'm interested in that, council. And I will say, I am personally interested in that.
I'm interested in that.
So, I mean, I'm certainly interested in it. And Shanika, were you saying you are too?
Specific to people that are currently displaced, not just anyone.
I don't know. I need more information. I think it's the first time I'm hearing about it.
Okay. So
yeah, and it depending on what the change is, I assume Brad, and council, I'm trying to be mindful of the fact that we're approaching 1 o'clock and I know everyone's got to jump off and go do a bunch of other things, but depending on what the change is, I mean, maybe there's things staff can do at their discretion. Maybe there's things that require council action. Maybe there's things that require planning, zoning vote and public hearing and then council action. So
has it outlined actually. Brad already did the work and it does take council action. It might have been able to go around P&Z, and he did think that there was, Brad, I don't mean to speak for you, that there was a way to tie it to things like currently displaced by the storm. The problem we're seeing is that these leases for long-term are 18 months and the 6-month limitation on the grandfather.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff though. There's like lifting temporarily the grandfathering requirement on short-term rentals. There's whether or not we can waive permitting requirements for various construction needs. There's kind of a gaggle of things, and I feel like we need to figure out we don't really have a format for going through those one by one. What would make more sense to me is if staff were able to get with Haggerty, FEMA, whoever, and come to us with a list of recommendations. If staff doesn't recommend them, then I don't know that we want council to run ahead, because there may be some very good reasons staff doesn't recommend them. So would council support staff, and maybe Brad, you're leading this effort, put together a list of things that you would recommend that could provide that short-term relief to folks that are trying to work through this recovery process, and let us take a look at those?
I would support an expedited list with analysis of which parts we can move the fastest.
And not in December.
Equitable, affordable housing still being the goal.
And ASAP, y'all. I mean, it's not easy to live in a hotel this long.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing the urgency. So Brad, unless Deborah says something else, maybe you can take the lead on that, since you're kind of already looking at those things. And I know Ben's been looking at some of that stuff too.
Sage, sorry, Esther. Are you imagining like calling a special meeting this month so we don't have to like go into the slow process of, we only have a couple meetings before the end of the year, because this is a conversation I'm hearing a lot in the community, and it's not a wait and see and get everything perfect. And it's like as quickly as we can. And I think the example you brought up of the 60-day or the 6-month, but there might be other stuff that I'd like to at least consider. So maybe I'd suggest that of like, if we need to have a special meeting to address this, I think that might be useful. I don't want to wait.
Well, and I'm sensitive to the overwhelm and workload that our staff is taking on. If Brad can come up with a list of what we can potentially move on, I'm happy for a special meeting, but faster.
Yeah, why doesn't Brad work on with staff and whoever else, get together that list of things that staff feels like they could support and recommend, and get it to us, and we can give a signal to Brad whether or not we would support an emergency meeting or a specially called meeting to work on those things.
At your language there, Mayor, no disrespect. It's just that if staff come up with a list, because it's what they support, there may still be things out in the community or that council sees as options. So like what our legal options are may be, what we can do, not just what staff thinks is good.
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge around one or two council members wanting to call a specially called meeting to do a thing the rest of the council isn't either up to speed on or in support of, or also wants to hear what staff has to say about it. So I would definitely say if there are things, Sage, that you are hearing that people are, running into barriers to getting swift action in terms of their recovery needs, shoot those to Brad and let him know what they are, and he can vet those with folks. I mean, so maybe Brad, when you circulate this list, you can say, these are the things councils or staff supports. These are the other things we heard about, but we're not prepared to support. So that we're aware of what the full list is. And then if there's some real consensus on council to do something staff's not in support of, we'll know that. But then we're not leaving anything off the list. How about that? I just want to be careful to not get out of step with what staff's ability to vet something and also where there's council consensus. Does that make sense, everybody? Just try and come up with a process here. Bye, Hannah.
Esther, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yes, council. I'm going to start coordinating with staff. I think what you will find is that some of these things are already in the works and already under consideration by staff. Maybe some things that you haven't thought of as well. Certainly, we welcome your feedback as well, but I will be more than happy to get with the city manager's office and other relevant staff and start putting together, at least for your consideration, some of the things that we see as maybe some of those immediate options that might have a policy element to them. But we'll provide you some information soon, and I welcome obviously any of your individual feedback.
If there's things that we want you to check out. While we're on the what are we doing next discussion, would there be interest in having a work session in December for us to get some consensus around those areas that council wants to be involved in around medium and long-term recovery policy issues? So again, this is going to be kind of those, not just sort of the administrative cleanup work and repair work, but kind of that bigger discussion about as we rebuild, what are these zoning changes we need to look at or consider? What are the ways we can support small business recovery as an example? What are the ways that we can help neighborhoods recover? Just sort of the things that are a little bit less clearly defined in terms of staff actions and places where council wants to work with the community on working on as we move through the recovery. So all I'm asking you now, I'm just dream this up, and the staff may say we can, I'll need to circle back with them, but the idea would be to have a work session, maybe ahead of our December 10th meeting, like tack it on to the beginning of that meeting, something like that.
So Rachel mentioned a work session before. Is this in addition to that, or this is that work session?
Rachel, I think you were talking about the briefing sessions, right? So and just to be clear on this conversation, we have 180 days where FEMA will give us 100% reimbursement for all the work that that Deborah and her team are carrying out to get our city cleaned up and recovered and repaired. And so one of the things that we're going to have here in terms of the immediate recovery, so the short term, is these sort of regular briefing sessions where we get that information. And that's what Rachel's talking about. She's talking about the first one happening on December, she said 21st, but then I upset the apple cart there and said, could we do it December 19th? And that'll be November 19th. So that'll be just for us to hear about that and ask questions and kind of make sure we're staying up to date on all of that recovery. This would be a work session for council to talk about outside of that recovery effort, debris removal, those kinds of things. That this would be a work session for us to talk about our role in that medium and long-term recovery and what our expectations are there. Okay, is that okay? Good. All right, that would be December 10th.
I will voice that more than bi-monthly sounds good. A lot happens in 2 months.
Oh, again, I'm asking about the work session, not the briefings,
Okay.
but you're talking about the briefings. Yes, more than, okay. Yeah. Heard, yeah. And we talked about, it should be every 10 days, should be every 14 days. We were just trying to figure out, I know we have to kind of balance like the gazillion of meetings everybody's in. It's hard. The other thing is, as I mentioned, for the swearing in ceremony, does it work for everyone to do December 2nd, Monday, December 2nd? Swear you in a day early.
If we can do it in the morning, I'm encumbered after 1 o'clock.
Is that, what do you guys
Can you
think?
say that again, Monday the 2nd instead of Tuesday the 3rd?
Right, that's right. Yes.
That works for me.
In the morning, December.
That's fine.
Yes, yeah, that would work for me. That's fine. Okay, and then Rachel's telling me we have one more item today to do. Okay.
It can be pretty quick, but Nikki does have some updates on our partners for our.
Oh, right. That's right. I'm sorry. I remember the.
And I can be super brief if you guys just want me to run through these slides, super brief. So Talia, next slide. So again, we're just following up. We wanted to come back with an update. Again, as this process is iterative, we want to make sure that we just bring council along, as was discussed earlier, into this process. So as we look to make city resources available into our community for business stabilization, rental assistance, home repair, I'm just sharing today that these are the partner organizations that we are speaking with. You'll see from the other slides, we do not have very specific details on the projects in and of themselves. We're just sharing today that these are the entities that we're working with, and we're working to finalize those details in collaborative partnership with these entities. The other thing I'll just highlight is we were informed that we are receiving additional CDBG funds in the amount of 1.7. So we're super excited about that. And we hope that we can utilize these existing program areas to think through how to allocate those funds and come back to council perhaps sometime in December. And again, I think we all agreed early on that these were important areas to focus on, in addition to what FEMA is doing to really understand where our lane exists. And that's how I believe we were able to achieve early consensus as to the expenditure of these funds. Next slide, I just want to highlight one key change that you'll see. This is a background slide that also came from that October briefing that we did. This is our oversight on staff, and I apologize. The amount available for our CDBG allocation for business stabilization has shifted from 929 to 704. Easy answer is that we did not account for the Patton Avenue sidewalk project when we pulled these numbers from our HUD platform. So forgive us there, give us a little grace. We were certainly working to meet the need in a timely fashion, and this is just a simple clerical error. So apologies on that. Again, just showing the other funding resources that are available that we are now programming. I want to just flip through the other slides. Next slide, Katie. Again, we had some criteria that we talked about with how we're looking to partner with these nonprofits, experience with government funding, of course, CDBG experience on that business restabilization. We want people that have those areas of service that are already active in our community and really understand the unmet community needs, who are able to leverage their networks to the people who are experiencing these issues. Next slide, Katie. So again, business stabilization grants, our framework we're looking at is the SBA, so Small Business Administration eligibility, and that is for repair, replacement of business infrastructure, inventory, equipment, as well as working capital. We have identified a $25,000 max grant is the cap for each business. I know there's been conversations around the revenue caps for businesses, and we are using that SBA definition, which would allow us to extend above that 1 million in revenue. So again, using that small business administration framework is really helping us to meet where we know there is need. Current action. So we are still in conversations with Mountain Biz. We are highly collaborative with them on defining how this program is going to slot in with the other programs that they're making available to the community. We're looking deeply at those HUD requirements and wanting to make sure that we meet those, but that work is underway. Next slide, we'll get into home repair. Here you'll see this amazing collaborative. The Asheville Regional Coalition for Home Repair does represent a lot of for nonprofits that have reach into our community. So really seeking to work with that collaborative so that we can meet the need. Details are still being ironed out. Again, we're trying to also understand what any federal requirements that we have within this lens, looking at that compliance with the FEMA duplication of benefit. We're structuring this as an initial go point, 750,000, holding back that 715 just to assess need, assess the opportunity for the remainder of funds. I know Buncombe County is doing work right now. We just want to make sure that we're in sync with other efforts underway. We want to get these funds out into the community, but also retain a little bit of flexibility in case we need to shift or be nimble in terms of meeting community needs. So just sharing that's our approach with this funding. Next slide, Katie, you'll see that's a similar approach that we're using for rental assistance. So we are seeking to partner with Eblin Charities, allowing that first tranche of funds to partner with Eblin there, again, giving us flexibility to assess need, assess the community response with that first flush of funding, and then be able to be nimble and respond with the remainder. Go ahead, Kim.
We're going to hear about this one. So just a heads up that Grace Covenant Church, I've been volunteering over there, and they've been doing private eviction disruption by paying people's rent. But one of the things that's coming up is some management companies are requiring, in order for them to pay October rent, it's requiring November rent also to be paid at the same time.
Okay.
And if we sit on these funds, we're going to see evictions in the courts. So I wonder what it looks like to make sure we're reaching out to our partners and identifying the need, whether it's making sure that folks, which I'm definitely going to let them know that Eblin Charities has these funds to point folks in that direction. But if we're sitting on funds while the courts are receiving eviction filings, it's going to cause more harm.
Kim, on the issue with the folks that the church is working with, my understanding is that a lot of their clients are undocumented and therefore can't use Eblin Charities because it requires a social security number. So that's a very challenging area to address
also,
in this crisis.
Eblin hasn't had our funds yet. So I'm trying really hard not to use specific management companies. When a management company that has hundreds of tenants is saying they have to pay November rent if October is going to be received, Grace Covenant is tapped out. I understand. I think it's still going to be a challenge due to the population that needs to be served.
And you call me with that management company, I'll happily call some folks. That sounds awful.
I suggest reaching out to the leadership team. I know Pisgah Legal is working closely with Grace Covenant and Just Economics over there. I'm doing what I can to help, but reach out directly.
If you want to send me some names, I'm happy to call them.
Add on to Kim, what you're saying, kind of the urgency of this. Also, similar, just seeing maybe in December we'd take this up. That makes me really concerned. And so, we have a council meeting on Tuesday. I understand there's only so fast you can go, but I don't know. I just feel like right now we made a call 2 weeks ago on the first tranche of money. We're seeing that we just made decisions on contracting. So that took 2 weeks. So if it's December 10th before we discuss how to divide the 1.7, that money might not even show up till January. That makes me very uncomfortable for our public. What does it take to go faster, especially with rent that's hitting first of every month? And then also seeing that I understand how fast we've been going, and that I have a lot of compassion of the numbers for the business grants changed, and that is what it is, and that's fine. But that is a lot less, and we're still really struggling with getting to a different tranche of businesses. And so what would it take to accelerate council's input for how we would like to see the 1.7 shared, so that we don't have to wait for our input in December and then you all to start contracting
Maggie, that makes me wonder if Brad's going to be sending us a document on like potential policy things, if the options from staff on how to spend that money could be in there and we could take action.
Yeah, I am really
Everybody
uncomfortable with the remaining balance of $500,000 when I've seen the stack of applications at Grace. I don't know if it means that we find them as another partner or we find a way to get this 500,000 into that gap. Yeah, that makes me really uncomfortable.
And the 1.7 of CDBG that we got from the direct allocation of HUD, that's a lot of dollars too that people need today.
And it just for clarity, and it sounds like there's understanding here, but these funds we can fully allocate without further council action. It's just we did want to hold back these funds just for flexibility. It doesn't mean that we can't allocate these funds as soon as the first 500 has been used, right, and has been billed for. But it is true that yes, the 1.7 of CDBG, we were notified at the end of October that those were in hand. And so, and we do have to do a certain amount of documentation that follows suit with our annual action plan, with our CDBG funds, much like we did before, right? But still, that is required in order to get that to council in December. I can look to see if there's any way in which we could act quicker, but that is, I mean, right now that's really 2 weeks away by the time we think about when staff reports are due and when to get that information together for circulation.
I mean, Nikki, with all due respect, I understand that there's so much process involved in running like clear legal government processes.
And I think the other thing is just that capacity in the community to, get the funds out. I mean, we're certainly, we're finding that balance. We're having those conversations with those organizations to understand their capacity as well. I think that's why it's really helpful to acknowledge there are other partners like FEMA. I mean, it does take everyone to really come together on this.
Maybe what I'm missing here is if anybody like Haggerty or some organization can help us understand the likely need. You know, in these situations, do people remain unhoused for 6 months? I mean, like, how do we know how best to help if we don't understand the picture? And I don't know if our consultants, I think Ari's still on here, but is there some like general, if you have a population displaced of 2,000 people, you need to raise X money? I mean, do we have an idea? Because then that would help us target how to spend some of this money. So we need to be kind of aggregating it ourselves, it sounds like.
Well, I certainly for our part, like really what we are hoping to understand now is to understand who FEMA is serving and then understanding who is not being served, right? And that's to me where the city can focus its efforts. And so again, like that's what you're seeing reflected here is that while there is rental assistance available for disaster survivors that have had those physical impacts, we're trying to understand where there are gaps still. And so for us, that's where we can identify where that need is immediately. But yes, I think data is also a key point of how we understand, again, even deeper as more funds are available, just to how to be strategic around that. But for now, we're working within the framework of just being clear on that landscape of funding and who's being served.
I mean, maybe it's a thing for like a Patrick Bowen or something. I don't know. All right, thanks. I'll be quiet now so we can all get on to the rest of our day.
Well, thanks for letting me do the quick. I know this is just really important. This entire conversation has been really important. So I just appreciate hearing everything today. So just to wrap up, Katie, I think the next slide, we just wanted to go back through key takeaways. So again, I just appreciate the comments and the sense of urgency, and certainly though we'll be coming forward with opportunities for the 1.7 as soon as we can.
Okay, did we get to the end of the, yes, okay. A couple of other announcements. Tomorrow there is a conference down in Morganton for cities, and I think counties, related to Hurricane Helene, that we'll have the FEMA administrator there and the governor and other, I think the Speaker of the House and the President Pro Tem are to be there, but it's a all-day kind of workshop, I guess is the best way to describe it. I don't exactly know how they selected who to invite. It was an invite only, but I think it went to all the mayors. So I'll be going, and I think Ben Woody is going, and also Bridget maybe. So just for your information, I think my understanding is that there are other mayors and staff will be there. Just trying to keep everyone in the loop. And I already mentioned the trip later in the month to Washington, D.C. to advocate for recovery resources for our community, along with other regional mayors. And I believe Amanda Edwards with our new county commission chair will be there. And then also the Governor-elect Stein has asked me to serve on his transition team to highlight the importance of the recovery for Western North Carolina and his administration. And that press release just went out today. So I just wanted to make you all aware of that. I think that's very important for our community for Western North Carolina. And I appreciate his emphasis on our recovery and his administration. That's it on my list. Okay, anything else, everybody? That was a lot. It was good to see everybody.
Thank you, everyone across the board, for all you're doing.
Yes, agreed. Okay, thanks. Goodbye.
Bye, y'all.